This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's community access radio station Plains FM 96.9 and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Coming up next on Plains FM is Find Your Bliss.
Good morning, Bliss lovers. It is Rebecca Davison, intuitive coach and mentor here, founder of the Intuitive Life Academy. You're listening to the Find Your Bliss radio show here on Plains FM every Thursday morning at 9 a.m, where we come together and discuss all things metaphysical, intuitive, and spiritual. So today I would like to talk about something that is a real game changer in terms of how you see your life, and that is the concept of radical acceptance. Now, some people listening to this might feel that radical acceptance sounds a little bit like giving up. That is not what acceptance is. Acceptance is being in the energy of being peaceful and calm about what is occurring. And of course, this comes back very much to the circumstance of understanding that you are the creator of your own reality. So you are the one who is perceiving what is occurring and therefore placing judgment on it, making things right and making things wrong, or being the person who's choosing to evolve and awaken and spiritually become the observer of your reality and what you are making your reality mean. So this is really, the process of duality, where we're experiencing separation from who we truly are when we're associating and identifying with form as opposed to our spirit. And often what happens, of course, is when we're identifying with form, when we're identifying with externals, i.e. things outside of our body, life, other people, circumstances, situations, and if we're doing that from the rational mind and the ego, then that's often going to be creating suffering for us, especially if we're making those things black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. Because if we have, that duality, that polarization of this is right and this is wrong, then we're creating a sense of separation from what is. And that, of course, creates our suffering. And when we are, in that energy, it can be difficult, right? It can be very contracted, and it can be difficult for us to actually see that it's actually our interpretation of what is occurring that is creating the stress and therefore the suffering. So again, I've talked about this before, but the example that one would use here clearly to demonstrate this is, of course, death. And how we, as humans, of course, we have a natural instinct to thrive and survive, but also when we go into judgment about death and make death wrong, we can cause a lot of suffering instead of shifting our perspective and the paradigm and realizing that death really is essentially the ultimate and ironically the biggest surrender that we all undertake, the biggest process of letting go and accepting what is, which is that our time here on the earth plane has expired. So when it comes to radical acceptance, what is it that it really means? It means being the observer of your reality and being aware that you are the observer of your reality. They say enlightenment is really when the wave realizes that it's the ocean. So if you're using that concept here in terms of acceptance, it's realizing that your perspective of what is occurring is really the wave, and the bigger picture of reality is the ocean. So when we shift from just looking at our own particular circumstance to looking to the bigger picture, looking to source energy, looking to the universe, looking to oneness as energy, then we can shift our paradigm completely and in a circumstance, in a heartbeat. So one thing I think that is really important to remember when it comes to radical acceptance is that radical acceptance is a choice. We have a choice in every given moment where we place our focus and our perspective. And of course, whether that perspective adds to our life in the way of experiencing expansion, joy, harmony, bliss, or whether we experience contraction. And this, I appreciate, is not easy for human beings. One thing about the journey of spiritual awakening is it calls upon you for greater levels of accountability. There is a deep need for people who are evolving to accept greater and greater levels of self-responsibility and accountability. We are the ones who have to determine to what level of honesty, integrity, awareness that we are holding ourselves to. There is nobody else who can do that for us. We only do it ourselves. So that's why it's really great to ask the universe questions like, show me the truth. Show me what it is that I cannot see. Show me where my blind spots are. Because what we're really doing is we're asking to see things. When we ask that, we're asking to see things from the divine perspective. We're asking to see things from the bigger picture point of view. I often use the analogy, if you're struggling with something, that you place yourself on a cloud with an angel looking down on your circumstance to see the bigger picture of why it may be unfolding. So let's talk about that for a minute, because that's obviously a huge part of why we would need acceptance even in the first place. And that's where we experience dissonance, where we experience often what I would call triggering, which is where we have a circumstance where something comes up for us, right? We have an emotional eruption, we have emotional dissonance, somebody may say something and it bumps up against a belief that we have inside of ourselves, which is our interface, our field of interpretation of reality, how we deal, with what the relationship is like within ourselves, and therefore when our interface is when it's, how we see ourselves in relation to other people and in the world. And of course, this can create a lot of rub, and that rub always referring back to my high levels of accountability and self-responsibility, always comes up against the relationship that you have with yourself. I've spoken about this at length before, about how you can only hold space for somebody's emotions and energy to the level that you have held space for your own. For example, you can't be a witness and hold the space. Holding space means being able to be deeply present and open, right, with focused energy and attention, not checking out, not blanking out, not, checking your phone, filing your nails, right? It means literally focusing your energy and attention and allowing that person to have the experience they're having. It actually is intense work to hold space for people. People misunderstand it all the time. So holding space for somebody, you can only do that for somebody's emotions to the level that you have done it for yourself. So if you have allowed yourself to feel deeply into your pain, into your hurt, into your sadness, into your suffering, then you will be able to be present to somebody else's pain, hurt, suffering, disappointment, sadness, rage, whatever it is. If you haven't been able to do that for yourself, then it's going to create discomfort to see that in other people. And often what will happen is there will be some kind of emotional dissonance, or there will be some kind of triggering. You think about it, if you've had that experience previously, when somebody gets uncomfortable, it might bring up a little bit of dissonance for you, but it will be more familiar. There will be less friction. So it will be easier to be present to that emotion, especially if you have learned what it is to be the observer of your emotions rather than being in them. You have that spaciousness so you can observe them. then you can observe it in somebody else and hold space for them and be open-hearted and send them love and acceptance, right? But if we're in that space for ourselves where we haven't allowed ourselves to feel deeply, then if we have a circumstance in life where, something happens and we're experiencing that triggering, that feeling of discomfort, that feeling of there's pain in my, energetic field, then it's really the opportunity where we start to explore that. A lot of people get misguided because they feel the discomfort and then they just want to remove themselves. They want to stop. They don't want to be curious about the pain or the discomfort. If you have experienced that pain or discomfort, and right, your body's telling you all the time if you've had those circumstances, bless those people in your life where you have those circumstances, because they're helping you to grow and they're helping you to learn something about yourself. But take the leap and develop the courage to actually step in and start looking at where you have been triggered, where there has been a contraction, where there has been some discomfort or pain that has arisen, and learn what it takes, right, to move into that space. So one of the first energies that we have to be in to even begin to explore our emotions and to explore our interface between ourselves and other people is really the energy of acceptance. We have to accept that we have emotions. We have to bring acceptance to the fact that we all have the same range of emotions. And if we can bring that energy of acceptance to the fact that it's perfectly normal and natural to have emotions, then it can be easier to realize that we actually have a choice in regards to what happens in those moments. So let me just give you an example where we can talk about radical acceptance, right? So if somebody has the awareness that they're feeling, maybe they've been at a party and somebody said something to them and it's brought up an emotional trigger, emotional wounding, right? A trigger is usually where there is part of you that is looking to be healed, right? So somebody says something, you're feeling discomfort, you're kind of like, why did they say that? You might be going into your ego, right? A higher level of conscious awareness goes, okay, actually, this is showing me something about myself. Awesome. I get to see what's looking to be healed, to ask yourself some questions, to do the self-inquiry, to find where the wounding is, right, which is what I teach people to do, is learn the tools, how to go inside yourself and ask and perceive and learn. And then when you gain the awareness that you can actually shift from feeling the resistance to coming into a space of acceptance of what is present. So this is literally how we can shift our life in a heartbeat, when we go, wow, I'm feeling some dissonance, I'm feeling triggered, I'm feeling distress, I'm feeling whatever the discomfort is, and then bringing awareness to that. And instead of going into judgment or criticism or making yourself wrong, you actually open it up to inquiry and go, this is a wonderful opportunity for me to learn about myself. Now, I've highlighted this in a circumstance where it's more contrast, right? Where there is more friction. But also too, acceptance can be something that you can practice in a day-to-day moment. If somebody says something unkind, acceptance means being willing to look perhaps for what is motivating that person to say that thing, right? It's being willing to look beyond the words to the energy, right? Because most people, they don't say something unkind unless they're feeling sad, hurt, depressed, threatened, whatever it is. But we're being willing to look for that. Being willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. And this is often how we develop our intuition, because intuition is the ability to read energy, to speak to the divine. And the divine will always show you whether somebody's hurting, sad, upset, mad, sad, lonely, whatever it is. Your intuition can show you that very quickly and very easily. And then we can bring more acceptance to that fact that maybe that person said something unkind, But we realize, A, it's not about us because people are always, they're a reflection of themselves. But B, to step into that space of going, I can choose to bring more love and acceptance to this situation because I'm choosing to have more awareness. I'm choosing to see the truth. I'm choosing to actually go a little bit deeper so connection can be restored or maintained. And that is the whole point of intuition. That is the whole point of spiritual development, is unity. It's recognizing that we're all the same energy, that we are one love, we are one soul, we are one universe. So practicing radical acceptance in your day-to-day reality means being willing to let go of right and wrong. Now, Rumi talked about, the ancient poet, Rumi talked about this in one of his poems, and it was simply something along the lines of, there is a field beyond right and wrong, and I'll meet you there, which essentially is saying that, do you want to be right? Do you want to make the other person wrong? And happiness really is beyond that. So even being prepared to play with this as a concept initially, but also to deeply take this into your reality energetically, that there is no right or wrong. And people find this challenging because, of course, what happens is your ego goes, but what about this? But what about this? But what about this, right? But what about genocide? But what about racism? But what about people who are cruel? But what about dictators? But what about the Holocaust? But what about? Okay, so, and again, noticing what happens when we make things wrong. When we make things wrong, we create contraction. When we make other people wrong, it creates disconnection. Like an evolved person will see it, acknowledge it, and choose to do better, right? Choose to be the person who loves the victim and the perpetrator. Okay, which is a big ask, right? It's not just about siding with one side, because of course when we side with one side, we create disconnection. We create separation from the perpetrator. The perpetrator also needs help in whatever circumstance they're the perpetrator in. They need kindness, they need love, they need understanding, just as much as the victim does. And also too, we need to evolve as a human species to be able to find the solution to these very serious issues that we face, which may be racism, it may be child sex trafficking, it may be refugee status, it may be a myriad of different things that we actually need to find the solution for. But we need to do that, as you can see, from a much bigger perspective, rather than this side is right and this side is wrong. If there is a victim and a perpetrator, both sides need help. And again, if we can shift into this place of more radical acceptance of both, then we have a greater chance of finding the solution and actually implementing it. So really, if we look at ourselves in terms of evolution on the planet, we're not doing so well because we haven't actually been able to really upload that perspective. We haven't really been able to integrate into ourselves fully yet at this point that we are one. So, because often you'll see people, right, then they're really into their conspiracy theories, and it's like, and there's been a lot of that with, of course, Corona and 5G and Wuhan and viruses being released on purpose. And I get it. And not discrediting anybody's belief systems, but I want you to ask yourself, are you focused on the solution or the problem? Because the problem places you in disconnection. And when you're in disconnection, you create dissonance. You can't find the solution. The solution will only come from a loving vibration. So we really need to kind of expand our energy, choose more love, and choose to find the answers to a lot of really serious problems. But we're not going to do that from making one side right and one side wrong. We need to have a bigger perspective where we can go, actually, how can we help both sides? How can we help the people who are in a space where they don't understand that child sex trafficking is wrong? And again, you can see how a lot of this probably leads back to one of two things, right? Money and power. And what does it take for people to feel safe no matter what? In terms of, and again, which is a good case really for money intelligence and money emotional safety being taught in schools. So we don't have to grow up feeling like scarcity and lack, so therefore I have to pick up a gun to feel powerful, to create dominance over somebody else so I can take their money so I can feel safe because I have money. Right, you can see, there's a lot of problems in the world that we need help, but we need to do this from a much bigger perspective than we currently have. And this is not, again, acceptance is not giving up. Right? Acceptance doesn't mean that I'm just going to accept all the rubbish that is happening in the world today. It means, how can I actually move into a greater level of understanding and awareness and use my conscious mind to be able to shift into a place where I can receive a divine solution and implement that? Because you think about it, a lot of people will ask you, what do you stand for? What is it that you can't stand? But you want to be really, really mindful of how you're choosing to expend your energy, because you only get so much energy per day in terms of how you expend it or spend it as such. So you want to be really mindful of, are you using that energy to push against something and create resistance? Or are you using that energy to create flow or momentum in a direction that does serve? And this is a huge key to life in general, whatever it is that you're doing or whatever it is that you're creating. That's a very famous quote, right? The trick is not to focus on the old, it's to focus on creating the new, right? Directing your energy and attention on where you do want it to go, rather than focusing on what it is that you don't want. This is manifestation 101, really. But we really need to embody this to a much deeper level to go, okay, well, how do I shift my perspective so I'm not actually in dissonance with anything? And how can I be the person, not from a place of ignorance, but from a place of much greater awareness and consciousness, who chooses the highest love frequency, which is the most expanded, to be able to find any solution? Because as we know, for every problem there is a spiritual solution. All we need to do is ask and then show up and be consistent and cultivate our relationship with the divine to really be able to step into that space where we can receive the answers and we can move forward and we can create what it is that we want, because we've got the momentum, whether that's the end to child sex trafficking, whether it is a political issue, whether it's racism, whether it's something that's fundamentally flawed in our government, etc., to be able to use the power of the solution to move things forward rather than focusing our energy on what it is that we're choosing to resist. And this is where radical acceptance can be so beautiful. And then one of the ways to do this, of course, in your everyday life is to question. So when you notice that you're having a really strong opinion or reaction, I would really encourage you to start off with the stock standard mainstay, which is this true? And how do you know that it's true? Because I have seen people defend their beliefs to the death and they don't even know why it's true, right? They have picked up a belief somewhere along the way, and it might have just been because somebody said it with conviction and they were like, wow, their energy is more stronger, more powerful than mine, so it must be true. But when you ask them how they've come to that conclusion, they have no idea. They've just picked it up as a belief. It's just like, yep, that sounds good. That sounds true. That must be the truth, right? And this is why the media has so much sway on us, folks, because they'll say something bright and shiny and powerful and people believe it. They don't take the time to question it and go, is that true for me? Is that really true? Do I have empirical proof that what is being said is true? And you could totally say the whole same thing about me in terms of developing intuition. And how do I know it's true? I know it's true for me because I have shown up and had miraculous experiences which are unexplainable. You could probably sit down and explain it scientifically. But again, science and spirituality cross over all the time. Everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. The secrets of the universe, Nikola Tesla, right? And Albert Einstein. One biggest forerunners really in the metaphysical arena in terms of moving spirituality forward, because you can't deny everything is energy. It's a scientific fact. You can't destroy energy. You can shift it to a higher vibration, though, which is true. You can't change what's happened to the past, but you can definitely change the vibration. So coming back to radical acceptance of what is, really being that person who's choosing to ask themselves, is what I'm having the strong emotional reaction to, is it true? Asking yourself, what's going on with me that I'm having this really strong emotional reaction to what's being said? And of course, the other two mainstays which go with that, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? If somebody, if you're having a strong emotional reaction and there's part of you that just wants to react, that's when you want to be asking yourself those questions, right? Is what I'm about to say, is it kind? And is it necessary? But also too, is it true? Is what I'm about to say true? Is it connected to the highest part of my being? Is it coming from my soul, or is it coming from my ego? Is there part of me that's just wanting to hurt that person back? And people don't understand this. When you do not understand what it is to monitor your words and your language, energy comes back to you like a boomerang. So if you're sitting there being unkind and mean and nasty about somebody, their energy is going to somersault back on you and tap you in the ass. I put a Facebook post up about this the other day, actually, which essentially said that, if you're, you don't ever want to wish anybody harm, because through the law of one, which is the law of the fact that we are all connected, the law of one means that if you are unkind or mean, the person that it really ends up hurting is you. So and also too, they talk about this in the Bible, that, your sins aren't judged by God. You're already in the sin when you're in the energy of it, right? So you're really the person who is harmed by the sin is really the person who's done the sinning, because of the way that it creates, the feeling that it creates within you, the guilt, the shame, the contraction. That is you experiencing the sin. So, and again, that word sin, right? It's archaic, but using it to demonstrate a point, which is when you're in the energy of it, you're the one who's suffering because of it. So, and again, we do this to ourselves all the time, right? We're always the instigator of our own demise. Nobody can do anything that really can hurt us. But of course, we make a judgment on somebody else's behavior. We go, let's use a romantic relationship, right? We go, that person doesn't love me anymore, so therefore I'm not worthy, or I'm so sad. That is a fundamentally flawed premise, because you were love before you met that person. You are love when you're with that person, and you will still continue to be love long after that person has moved through your reality. So it's not a matter of needing to receive something from somebody else to know that you're loved. It is a relationship that you are having with yourself. And this is where people get into all sorts of trouble, because they use a relationship like a band-aid, going, I'm okay because I have this partner. And then you think on a fundamental level, anybody energetically would be like, I feel like you're using me, right? Rather than actually genuinely just showing up and loving me, because that is an amazing experience to create between us. And it feels so free and so open because you're giving love freely rather than coming from a place of needing the other person to behave in a particular way or to meet your needs, wants and desires and expectations. You're actually showing up fully ready and willing to give, because that is the greatest joy when it comes to love, rather than expecting, needing, or anticipating that person has to behave in a particular way for you to be happy. And this happens all the time. People get all caught up and all bunched up because they're not prepared to get to know themselves the most before they've even entered into a relationship. If you know yourself deeply, then a relationship is awesome, but it's a bonus. It's not the mainstay. It is not your anchor. It's not your foundation. You are your foundation. You are the person who's knowing themselves as love and choosing to love the other person. Spiritual, relationships really are all about spiritual growth, and whether you're choosing to grow with your partner or not. And that's the purpose of relationships. Every relationship you have in your life is for your conscious evolution. So are you bringing the energy of radical acceptance to those relationships? Are you choosing to be the observer and seeing what really is in terms of being present? Are you going into that space of, having your ego get triggered and then responding accordingly, or, going into a more contracted energy by reacting and not coming from a place of truth or kindness or even necessity? So radical acceptance is also realizing in every moment, like I said, that you have a choice. A lot of people don't think that they can control their emotions. And it's not really a matter of controlling them, because, controlling a car is a good thing. Being too controlling is not necessarily a good thing. But when it comes to our emotions, we need to learn how to kind of navigate them. And we need to learn what's true and what's not. And one of the best ways to do this, right, is to always honor the emotion that you're experiencing, but to question the belief from where the feeling originated from. So let me give you an example of that. Say you're upset because you see your partner do something that you don't agree with, right? But then from there, and you feel the feeling and you show up and you express that to your partner in a conscious and loving way, saying, I feel this because blah, 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 right? But the next level of conscious evolution is to really ask yourself, okay, well, where does the belief come from that contributes to me feeling this way? To go to that level of self-belief. And people take this for granted. They think, oh, that sounds like too much work, or I don't want to look at myself that closely, or that makes me feel uncomfortable. Damn straight, right? This is personal development at its best, at its finest, to actually go, what is my relationship with myself like? What do I believe about myself? Now, guys, I want to tell you, next week in the Intuitive Life Academy Facebook group, we are doing a self-worth week, right? So it's going to be a week of me doing Facebook Lives and giving challenges to the attendees on how to increase your self-worth, because self-worth underpins everything, right? Like what you receive in terms of money, abundance, your career, your relationships, your partnership, your children, how people treat you is reflected through your self-worth, and how you treat people, right? How you teach people how to treat you. So how do people treat you? Do they treat you with respect? Do they honor your time? Are they thoughtful and mindful of what is going on for you in your life? All of this comes back to your own self-worth. And if you're not really enjoying your current reality as much as you could, you want to start unpacking your self-worth and looking at it. So come along to the Facebook group and join us. It's on Intuitive Life Academy Facebook group. But if you look up Intuitive Life Academy on Facebook and you click on the group, you can add you have to join. You have to ask 3 questions to join, which is really, what's up for you at the moment in terms of how I can help you moving forward. But join the group and then be part of the challenge, right, to increase your self-worth. Because when you increase your self-worth, everything changes, right? You make different choices in regards to your relationships. You make different friendships. You make different connections, which can propel you forward in much bigger and greater ways. You hang out with different people. You charge more, right? You increase your prices. It's all reflected in your self-worth in regards to being invited to do events, opportunities, resources. Again, it all comes back to your self-worth and what you will and will not accept in your life and in your reality. So it's a really good thing to look at. Notice I didn't say self-love either, right? Like self-love is really just being yourself, because love is who you are. So self-love is really probably the process of peeling back all the layers, as is self-worth. But self-worth to me is really owning it. Right? Owning who you really are and stepping into the power of that. Because if you walk into a room and you're owning your worth, you're going to have a very different experience from a person who's walking into a room from the energy of fear or insecurity. People are going to notice. So do come along and check that out. It's going to be super fun. So today we're talking about radical acceptance and how you can really shift and change your light in a heartbeat. First and foremost, realizing that you'll always have a choice, that you are more powerful than your emotions, and you can interrupt yourself at any given time. So, and you think about it, right? If you're not focusing on something, then it's not occurring for you. It's like where you put your attention is where the energy flows. So, and you have to be the person, you think about it, you have to maintain a certain thought which contributes to the way you feel. If you change the thought, then you collapse the feeling. For example, if you're upset and you get interrupted, right? Maybe you're driving your car, you're crying because you're thinking of a certain thought, it's making you feel sad, and then somebody honks their horn at you, and then the next second maybe you get angry, and then the next second maybe you're laughing at yourself. Your thoughts can be interrupted, and you can be the person who interrupts them, right? And again, always endeavor to acknowledge and honor your feelings by feeling them. But, and I think a lot of people get fearful on that because they're like, oh, if I feel my feelings, I'm going to be there for 10 years, or they're too big, or it's too intense. That means that you're not feeling your feelings fully, and that takes a little bit of practice. But once you get started in doing it, you'll realize that what happens is it will feel uncomfortable, and then you'll turn it up a little bit more and it will feel even more uncomfortable. But eventually, when you have sat with the feeling and been present with it, it will shift, right? It might not feel like it at the time. It might feel really intense. It might feel really sad. It might feel really overwhelming. But if you sit with the feeling and honor it and be present to it, it will shift. That is what emotions do. And you'll know when you've fully felt a feeling, because it actually just disappears, right? It shifts, it releases. It's been acknowledged, it's been witnessed, so therefore it can go. Now, if you're really clever and you use your intuition, you can ask, right, what the feeling and the emotion is actually looking to tell you. You can get the information, and then it can shift even faster. Why? Because the message has been delivered, rather than just sitting in the discomfort of an emotion that's trying to tell you something and you're not getting the message. And therefore you're feeling overwhelmed, concerned, sad, fearful, because it's like, I feel terrible, but I don't really know what's up with me. Your emotions are a guidance system. Once you learn how to navigate it, your life changes completely. I'm actually working on developing a program around this because I see people get flustered on it so often because people find their emotions really messy a lot of the time. They don't have clarity in regards to what those emotions are actually trying to tell them. So once you do, you get crystal clear clarity, and when you have crystal clear clarity, it's much easier to move forward and to do what it is that you need to do. You go, oh wow, okay, boom, I got the download, got the message. That's what that emotion is telling me. I'm out of alignment with my truth. That's not for me, whatever it is, right? And then boom, get the information, make a decision, move on. But oftentimes too, right, people get so caught up in their emotions, they're kind of like, I can't figure this out. Or there's a really sad, heavy emotion that has been with them. For example, grief. Like, grief is one of those emotions, but you can actually tell with grief. I know this sounds strange, but for example, if you're going through a grief process, there's different types of grief. Like, what I would call clear-cut grief is just the outpouring of emotion that is clear. It's not muddied by any other contributing factor like guilt, shame, feeling like you should have done more for that person, so therefore feeling guilty, feeling ashamed that you held back something, or feeling regretful that something didn't play out the way that you wanted to. There is a big difference between that and just experiencing the clear emotion of grief. And being able to understand and discern that within yourself is really important, because if there's a muddied emotion, for example, when it comes to an energy like grief, then we need to be discerning enough to be able to identify that and go, oh, look, there's actually more in that than just clear-cut grief. So I need to be present and ask myself some questions and, release myself from any misconceived ideas or energy when it comes to those muddied emotions. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Clear cut, just feel the feeling. It's just there. It's just how you feel. Muddied, more emotion is really when there's other energy connected to it, which has kind of got it all tangled up in a bit of a mess for you. So we need to learn how to be discerning and detangle that so we can just get to clear cut. Because when you have a clear cut emotion, you can feel it and it will move through super quick because it's clear. Right? There's no drag on it. There's no other form of resistance. You can just feel it and it will roll through. And then, you can bounce back up again when it's a bit more muddied sometimes. It can hold you down and it can feel really heavy. And that's when work needs to be done to release ourselves from those lower frequencies of energy. Because often when we're in those spaces, it can feel like it's never going to end. And that's where work needs to be done, because often that heavy energy will stay until the message has been delivered. And if you're not getting the message, then it's just going to continue. So that's when we really need to learn what it takes to, interpret the energy and the emotion so we can set ourselves free from it. Anyway, we are talking about radical acceptance today and how you can practice radical acceptance, talking about how you get to choose in any given moment and how to, one of the first things to do really in terms, and again, this happens naturally really when you go through a spiritual awakening, but you realize that there is spaciousness around you. When you have that spaciousness, it's easier to be present to your own emotions. And this is why people meditate, right? To create that space, to create the stillness where we can be really present to the voice and energy of God, as opposed to just our own monarchy mind and our own thoughts. And often in that spaciousness, then we can actually start navigating our emotional guidance system with more clarity because we've got space to do it. That expression, can't see the wood for the trees. That's often what happens for us in our emotions. People mistake that they think that they are their emotions. No, you are not your emotions. Right? Your emotions is energy that is moving through you. But often when we're in those emotions, we don't realize that it's an energy that's moving through. We think that it's us. And often too, I've seen this so many times, we're having an intense contracted emotion, contracted in lieu of negative. What happens, of course, is people often make themselves wrong for feeling that way. So I want you to even play around with that. Like, what does it take to actually go, hey, you know what? There is a spectrum of emotions. Some of them are more expanded, some of them are more contracted. What does it take for me to be in loving acceptance of the fact that they're all equal, right? They all have a benefit because they're all showing me something. Contracted emotions are a great way of showing you that you're off track. doesn't make you wrong or bad. It's just the universe's way of getting your attention and saying, hey, I'm just letting you know that you're a bit off track. If you're feeling depressed, for example, whereabouts are you thinking that on some level that you're incomplete? Where are you telling yourself that story that you're incomplete? And what is the remedy for that? The remedy, as we know, is you only lack what it is that you do not give. Now let's break that down. Okay, so you only lack what you do not give. What does that mean? That means that if you are feeling incomplete on some level, what you're essentially saying is that you're lacking something. Like, I'm not good enough. What does good enough look like? What would good enough be constituted by? How would you know that you're good enough? You have to be really mindful of the questions you ask yourself in situations like that. So that's probably not the best question, but the best question perhaps is, well, how do I feel like I'm incomplete? And some people might say, oh, well, I don't have a partner in my life. And it's kind of like, do you need a partner to be complete? No. So, and also too, why would you want a partner in your life? And it's like, well, I want to be loved. And it's like, well, where are you not extending yourself love? And then people, of course, go into, well, I can't romance myself. Yes, you can. Well, I can't receive that physical touch from another person. Yes, you can. So, the argument really becomes redundant because energetically you can literally give yourself everything that you would receive in a romantic relationship. And this, of course, brings us back to the fact that we are the creator of our own reality, because when you bring it back to being in a romantic relationship, that is formed by your perception through your brain, through your filter, through your reality. On some level, there has to be some part of you that identifies something in the other person that you like. That is going through your field of reality. That's going through your circuitry that says on some level, yes, I like this person, probably because on some level you identify with them. There's parts of you that identify with the other person. It feels familiar. You feel like a match. There's some level of compatibility, which is awesome. But again and again, those relationships come into your life to help you grow. That is the purpose of relationships. So you can also grow outside of the context of a relationship. I've committed my life to personal and spiritual growth. Do it every day, but I also see every relationship in my life as an opportunity. You are having all the experiences that you're supposed to have. You are meeting all the people in your life that you're supposed to meet. It is all divinely orchestrated in the respect of helping you to grow and evolve. Yes, you have free will. You're the one who can go, okay, I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to choose personal growth. I'm not going to choose acceptance. I'm going to choose dissonance. It's your choice, right? Your choice. You can choose to be in non-acceptance. You can choose to be in resistance. You can choose to be in suffering. It's totally your choice. You have free will, which is why a lot of people on the flip side, they find it so hard to choose their own power, because when somebody turns around and says to them, you can actually stop your own beliefs, right? You can change your mind. You can question yourself. You can ask yourself if what you're telling yourself is even true. You can bring the energy of acceptance to your own hurt, pain, suffering. You can choose to move into peace in any given moment. People really struggle with this because often we've been conditioned to believe that we are less powerful than our own emotions, that we don't have the courage to be able to show up for them. Which is that would make a great thesis, wouldn't it, in terms of why we struggle so much to be present to our own emotions, because we think they're too much or they're too powerful. Like most people, when they have an intense emotion, when it comes into their awareness, they turn it down because often they perceive it as a threat, as opposed to actually opening up their heart, their energy, their awareness, and going, wow, this is a really full-on emotional experience that I'm having right now. I'm actually going to turn it up. I'm going to have the courage to actually lean into this big time with an open heart. And often too, right, depending on where we are at in our level of awareness, we have to work through our own defense mechanisms to even start beginning to feel. Oftentimes I've worked with people where people have been numb, right? They don't feel anything because they've been so sensitive in their life. And then, of course, they've had a lot of experiences which have caused them pain. So they've turned their feelings off. So they have to unlearn that to make it safe to even begin to start feeling their feelings. And this often happens for intuitive and sensitive people. It's like, being intuitive can feel like a curse, right? Because you can feel really sensitive, you can feel empathetic, you can feel other people's feelings just standing next to them, and it can feel overwhelming. This is why we need to do the intuitive work of being the master of our own energy to get really clear on what is ours and what's not, and then to love ourselves enough to not carry energy for other people. People do this all the time. One of the biggest plagues on the planet is being brought up, especially as a good boy or a good girl, and then people turn into people pleasers and they give their energy away, they scatter their own energetic fields, and then they wonder why they feel crappy and then end up feeling resentful because they're overgiving and they're not receiving from themselves. So again, radical acceptance is really the ability to kind of knock things on their head and shake things out of all the pockets, and really to step down and create a whole new paradigm where you're going to go, actually, what would somebody who really values themselves do right now? How would they respond to this? How would I respond to this if I was choosing to see things beyond right and wrong? How would I respond to this from a place of neutrality? If I wasn't being colored by my own emotions in this circumstance, how could I see this differently? Where am I giving my power away in terms of how I feel emotionally right now? Which is why they always say, right, don't make a decision when you're feeling really emotional. You want to try and do it from a place of neutrality, to see it from lots of different angles, preferably one that feels calm and peaceful. So again, honor the feeling, feel the feeling, but question the belief that is contributing to the feeling being there in the first place. So radical acceptance, folks, is really that ability to shift your dissonance back into a loving space. Instead of going, this is right and this is wrong, going, what's it going to take to awaken so I can be free of judgment? So I can move beyond the energy of judgment. So I can actually live in reality where there is no right or wrong. There's just awareness and choice. Like, does this feel good? Yes. Does this feel not so good? Yes. So maybe I'm not going to choose that. I'm going to choose the thing that feels more expanded. And literally dropping our rational mind and starting to learn and live from energy. What does the energy say? The energy doesn't have an agenda. The energy never lies. The energy is what it is. The energy is not going to tell you something that's untrue. Your body knows what energy feels like. Your body's going to tell you the truth by the energy and the way that it feels. So we need to unlearn in a lot of ways through our rational critical mind and really drop into that space where we're prepared to learn what it takes to speak to the energy. So folks, I have been talking today about radical acceptance. You can find more by going to www.rebeccadavison.life. That's my website. You're always welcome to connect with me for a free 25-minute consultation in regards to how to upgrade your life and really to step into massive self-worth so you can live a life that you really love and develop your intuition so you can ascend. Right? Your ascension process is really the process of having a much more expanded viewpoint of the world. All of your suffering comes from having too limited a view. So if you are suffering at the moment in any way, shape or form, there's work to be done in regards to expanding your perspective. Because when you see more, you know more. When you know more, you have better choices. When you make better choices, you can bring bigger energy into your life. It is all connected. And again, the journey of radical acceptance is realizing that you have a choice in every given moment. People resist this all the time. They think that it's not possible. They think that it's not possible to change their emotion. They think that it's not possible to interrupt their own thoughts. It takes practice. But once you have that mastery, which is so beautiful, I'll give you an example of this. I remember driving into Christchurch to the radio show of all places one day, and I could literally, it was almost like it was observing my own thoughts, and I could see that my mind was about to choose a thought process which was going to take me to a place where I felt miserable. But in that same moment, I decided against it. I literally said to my own mind, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to think that thought. I'm not choosing that. And it happened pretty much simultaneously. And it was amazing because it was like, oh my goodness, this is what self-mastery feels like. Knowing that there's an old train of thought that my mind would have just gone down naturally by default, and cultivating enough self-awareness where you can actually stop yourself in your tracks. It was a moment of revelation for me because it was like, it's totally possible. It takes practice, but it's totally worth it. So that would be my greatest wish for you folks, is to get to that place where you know that you are the master of self and you have many, many tools and resources available to you to help you live an amazing and fantastic life. As always, it has been so much fun to connect with you guys. Please do send me an email or connect with me on Facebook, or by emailing me at my website. It's probably the best way. Again, www.rebeccadavison.life. I love to hear your ideas on what you love to hear, to experience, to talk about through the Find Your Bliss radio show here on Plains FM. I'll look forward to connecting with you guys again next week. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to have you tune in. I'm sending you so much love and many, many blessings. And if nobody's told you, remember that you are love and you are deeply loved by the universe. Lots of love, folks. Bye for now. Bye.